I'm Margaret, 68 years old, and until last year, I thought my retirement savings were secure after 4 decades of teaching. I never imagined my own son Richard would betray me. That Tuesday afternoon at Springfield Trust Bank changed everything when I accidentally spotted him and his wife Amanda at the manager's desk with my account statements. The shock of seeing Amanda greedily counting my hard-earned money while Richard signed papers still haunts me. If you're watching this from another city where family betrayal hit close to home, give this video a like and subscribe to hear how I turned this nightmare into a valuable lesson for us all. My life before that terrible day was comfortable but never extravagant. After teaching American literature at Springfield High School for 40 years, I'd managed to save a decent nest egg. Not wealthy by any means, but enough to live without financial worries in my modest 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street. My husband Franklin and I had purchased it when Richard was just a toddler, and after Franklin passed away from heart failure 5 years ago, it became my sanctuary of memories. The neighborhood has changed over the decades, but I've maintained my garden and kept the house in good shape. My daily routine involved morning coffee on the porch, tending to my vegetable garden, volunteering at the library twice a week, and occasional lunches with my teaching colleagues who'd also retired. It wasn't an exciting life, but it was mine, and I'd earned every peaceful moment of it. Richard was our only child, born when I was 26 after several years of trying to conceive. From the moment he arrived, he became the center of our universe. Franklin worked extra shifts at the manufacturing plant to ensure we could provide Richard with opportunities neither of us had growing up. I still remember the pride in Franklin's eyes when Richard graduated college, the first in our family to earn a degree. Throughout his childhood, Richard was a sweet, thoughtful boy. He'd bring me wildflowers picked from the yard and make handmade cards for every occasion. His intelligence was apparent early on, and I spent countless evenings helping with homework, nurturing his curious mind. Our bond felt unbreakable. Even during his teenage years, when many parents struggled with rebellion, Richard remained close, confiding in me about school troubles and first crushes. I thought I knew him completely. When Richard introduced Amanda 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy for him. At 39, she was attractive, articulate, and seemed to adore him. Her background in marketing complemented his work in digital advertising, and they appeared perfect together. I welcomed her into our family with open arms, hosting Sunday dinners and making efforts to form a mother-daughter bond I'd always wanted. Their wedding was small but elegant, held in the garden of a historic hotel downtown. Without hesitation, I contributed $20,000 toward their special day. Franklin had left a modest life insurance policy, and I felt he would have wanted to give Richard a beautiful wedding. 6 months later, when they found their dream house, I offered $30,000 for their down payment. The gratitude in Richard's eyes made every penny worthwhile. I never expected repayment. Seeing my son settled and happy was enough. Things began changing about a year ago. Richard lost his position at the marketing firm during company-wide layoffs. Initially, he seemed motivated, talking about starting his own consulting business. Amanda supported his entrepreneurial aspirations, and I offered encouragement too. But as months passed, tensions became apparent. Their visits grew less frequent. When they did come for dinner, conversations often steered toward finances. Amanda would casually mention their mortgage struggles or business startup costs, while Richard would awkwardly change the subject. I noticed how Amanda's eyes lingered on my modest jewelry or the antique furniture Franklin and I had collected over the years. She began asking questions about my retirement accounts, framing them as concern for my financial well-being. "Have you updated your will recently, Margaret?" she asked during one dinner. "You should make sure everything's in order at your age." Richard started calling separately, inquiring about my savings and investments. "Mom, you should consider putting your money in more accessible accounts," he suggested. "What if there's an emergency and you need help managing things?" I explained that my financial advisor had created a conservative but effective portfolio, and that I was comfortable with my arrangements. This answer seemed to disappoint him. I didn't connect these conversations to anything sinister. After all, this was my Richard, my sweet boy who had always made me proud. If he needed money, I reasoned he would simply ask. I had helped him before and would again, within reason. but something in my subconscious must have registered warning signs. The first concrete concern arose when I noticed I hadn't received my monthly bank statement. Thinking it was lost in the mail, I called the bank. The representative informed me they'd been sending statements to my email instead of mail, per my request. I had made no such request. Confused but not yet alarmed, I updated my contact preferences and requested paper statements again. A week later, I received a thank you call from a credit monitoring service I had apparently signed up for. Again, this was something I had no knowledge of. When I explained this to the representative, she grew concerned and suggested I visit my bank in person. Looking back, these were the first tangible signs that something was terribly wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to suspect my own son. That Tuesday started like any other day. I had my morning coffee, watered my African violets, and made a shopping list for groceries. My sister Dorothy had sent me a birthday check for $100, and I planned to deposit it before running errands. Springfield Trust Bank was only a 10-minute drive from my house, in the same shopping plaza as the supermarket where I bought groceries each week. The bank was busier than usual that afternoon. A young mother struggled with a stroller near the entrance, so I held the door for her, receiving a grateful smile in return. The familiar scent of coffee from the complimentary station mixed with the subtle perfume of the fresh flowers they always kept at the greeter's desk. Cynthia, the teller who usually handled my transactions, waved from her window. I waved back, planning to head to her line. That's when I saw them. In the far corner of the bank, partially obscured by a decorative plant, Richard and Amanda sat at a desk with Mr. Peterson, the branch manager. Something about their posture struck me as odd. Richard was hunched forward, his shoulders tense, while Amanda sat straight-backed, her expression eager. Papers were spread across the desk, and Mr. Peterson's brow was furrowed as he pointed to various documents. Instead of approaching, I stepped behind a brochure display. Something instinctive told me to observe quietly. From this position, I couldn't hear their entire conversation, but fragments drifted toward me. The transfer authorization seems to be in order, Mr. Peterson said, though his tone carried a hint of hesitation. But given the substantial amount and nature of the account, perhaps we should contact the primary account holder directly. Amanda's voice came next, sharper and more insistent. That won't be necessary. We've explained that my mother-in-law has authorized us to manage her finances. She's becoming quite forgetful lately. My heart began pounding against my ribs. Forgetful? I graded 60 student essays just last month for a former colleague who needed assistance. I balanced my checkbook to the penny and remembered the birthdays of every former student who kept in touch. Forgetful was not a word anyone would use to describe me. I watched in growing horror as Amanda reached for a stack of cash the bank manager had counted out. Her red-painted fingernails flashed as she quickly thumbed through the bills, a smile spreading across her face. Richard, meanwhile, was signing multiple documents, his hand shaking slightly. I noticed sweat beading on his forehead despite the bank's cool air conditioning. Mr. Peterson still looked concerned. This withdrawal will significantly impact the retirement account. Are you certain this is what Mrs. Bradley wants? Perhaps we should call her while you're here. Richard cleared his throat. My mother trusts us completely with this. She's aware of the withdrawal. It's for her new living arrangements we're arranging. New living arrangements? I had no plans to move from my beloved home. The house where Richard took his first steps, where Franklin and I had built our life together. As I stepped closer, I caught sight of my monthly statements on the desk. Not just the current month, but several months' worth. Next to them lay a document with what appeared to be my signature, though I had never seen it before. With growing certainty, I realized my son had been intercepting my mail and forging my signature. I couldn't breathe. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, with Richard and Amanda at the end of it. Before I could reconsider, my feet carried me forward. Richard? Amanda? What exactly are you doing with my accounts? The tableau before me froze. Mr. Peterson looked up first, relief washing over his face. Mrs. Bradley, I'm so glad you're here. I was just discussing your accounts with your son and daughter-in-law. Richard's face drained of color. The pen he was holding clattered to the desk. Mom. What are you doing here? Amanda's reaction was different. After a momentary widening of her eyes, her face hardened into something I'd never seen before. She didn't release the cash in her hands. "Margaret," she said coolly, "Richard and I were just taking care of some financial matters for you. As we discussed." "We discussed nothing of the sort," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "Mr. Peterson, I have authorized no one to access my accounts or make withdrawals on my behalf." The manager's professional demeanor didn't slip, but I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. He immediately pressed a button under his desk. "Amanda, please return the cash to me," he said firmly. "Mrs. Bradley, would you like to sit down? I believe we need to sort this out immediately." Amanda clutched the money tighter. "This is ridiculous. Tell her, Richard. Tell her we have permission." But Richard couldn't look me in the eye. "Mom, please, if you'd just let me explain. I needed to access some funds temporarily. For the business. I was going to pay it all back." "How much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How much were you taking today?" Mr. Peterson answered when Richard couldn't. "The withdrawal being processed was for $85,000, Mrs. Bradley." The room swayed around me. $85,000. Nearly half of what I had saved for retirement. The security guard approached, responding to the manager's silent alarm, as another bank employee guided me to a chair. "This isn't what it looks like," Amanda insisted, finally relinquishing the cash to Mr. Peterson. "Margaret is confused. We have documentation." "Forged documentation," I corrected, finding my voice again. "Richard, how could you do this? How could you steal from me?" His face crumpled. "Mom, I'm sorry. The business is failing. We're behind on the mortgage. Amanda's parents won't help anymore. I just needed a loan. A loan is something you ask for, not something you take," I said, tears finally breaking through. "You would have stolen my security, my future, without even asking me?" Bank security had arrived, and Mr. Peterson was explaining the situation in low, professional tones. Amanda's protests grew louder, drawing attention from other customers. My humiliation was complete when Mr. Peterson suggested we continue the discussion in his private office. Once seated in the windowless room with its corporate artwork in degrees on the wall, the full picture emerged. Richard had been redirecting my mail for months, using personal information only a son would know. He had gained online access to my accounts. Today wasn't the first withdrawal, just the largest. Already $30,000 had disappeared in smaller amounts. When the bank's fraud investigator asked if I wanted to press charges, Amanda became livid. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed at me. "He's your son. Your only child." I looked at Richard, silently pleading for him to say something, to explain this nightmare away. But he just sat there, shoulders slumped, defeated. "I need time to think," I finally said. "But I want all access to my accounts frozen immediately, except for me personally." As I left the bank that afternoon, my world had shattered into unrecognizable pieces. My son, my Richard, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, and I had no idea how to put my life back together again. The drive home from the bank remains a blur in my memory. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and having to pull over once when tears made it impossible to see the road. My mind raced with questions. How long had they been planning this? What had happened to the son I raised? Was I somehow responsible for creating a person capable of such betrayal? My body physically reacted to the trauma. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. A pounding headache formed at my temples. I found myself muttering aloud, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "This can't be real," I kept saying. "There must be some explanation." As I turned onto my street, memories assaulted me. Richard learning to ride his bicycle on this very road. His small face determined as Franklin jogged alongside, ready to catch him if he fell. Teaching him to drive in my old station wagon. His teenage concentration so intense. The day he left for college, how I'd stood in the driveway waving until his car disappeared around the corner, then went inside and cried both sad and happy tears. After his father died, Richard had been my rock. He called daily in those first devastating weeks, brought meals, helped me navigate the complex paperwork of death. You've always been there for me, Mom, he'd said then. Now it's my turn to be there for you. Where was that Richard? How had he become the man who would forge my signature and steal my life savings? When I finally entered my empty house, the silence was deafening. I moved through the rooms in a daze, eventually settling in Franklin's old recliner, where I'd always felt safe. My phone, which I'd silenced during my bank visit, showed 8 missed calls from Richard and 3 from Amanda. A text notification appeared. Mom, please call me. I can explain everything. It's not what you think. As I sat there, another message came through from Amanda. Margaret, you're overreacting. Richard was just trying to help manage your money since you're getting older. Call us back so we can sort this misunderstanding out. Misunderstanding? They had attempted to steal $85,000. I felt a flash of anger cut through my shock. How dare she try to gaslight me? The phone rang in my hand. Richard again. This time I answered. Mom, thank God. Please, can I come over? We need to talk. His voice sounded desperate, but I couldn't tell if it was desperation over being caught or genuine remorse. Either way, I needed answers. Yes, I said simply and hung up. While waiting for Richard to arrive, I made myself a cup of tea, moving on autopilot. The familiar ritual brought no comfort. I found myself standing at the kitchen window, staring at the bird feeder Franklin had built. A cardinal landed, its bright red plumage stark against the green of the yard. Life continuing normally while mine had exploded. Richard arrived 45 minutes later alone. I was grateful Amanda hadn't come. One betrayal at a time was all I could process. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his normally neat hair disheveled. When he reached to hug me, I stepped back, maintaining distance. The hurt in his eyes at this rejection would have once broken my heart. Now it barely registered through my protective numbness. We sat in the living room, the coffee table between us like a demilitarized zone. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Why? I finally asked. One simple word that carried the weight of immeasurable pain. Richard ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar from his childhood that it momentarily confused my anger with maternal concern. The business is failing, Mom. I'm in debt. Deep debt. The credit cards are maxed out, we've missed 2 mortgage payments, and the bank is threatening foreclosure. You could have asked me for help, I said quietly. I did. Remember last Christmas when I mentioned the business was struggling? You changed the subject, talked about how you needed your savings to last. I remembered the conversation differently. He had vaguely mentioned cash flow issues, while accepting my holiday gift of $500. There had been no clear request for substantial financial help. That wasn't asking, Richard. And it certainly wasn't me giving permission for you to drain my retirement accounts. He leaned forward. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, just a loan until the business turned around. I was going to pay you back with interest. By forging my signature? By telling the bank I'm becoming forgetful? By taking $85,000 without my knowledge? His face flushed. That was Amanda's idea. She said you'd never agree to help us if we asked directly. So you decided to steal instead? It wasn't stealing, he insisted. You're my mother. Family helps family. This wasn't the first time, was it? I asked, remembering what the bank had uncovered. Richard's silence confirmed what I already knew. How much have you already taken? He stared at the floor. About $30,000 over the past few months. The amount hit me like a physical blow. Tire-t-il tous en dollars? Richard, that's more than I make in a year of pension. Amanda has expensive tastes, he muttered. Her family has money, and she's used to a certain lifestyle. When I couldn't provide it anymore, things got bad between us. So you sacrificed your relationship with me to please her? The hurt in my voice was unmistakable. It wasn't like that, he protested. I was desperate. Her parents cut us off, said I needed to provide for her properly. The business needs just a little more time to become profitable. The market downtown, the rent, the employees, it's all so expensive. You should have come to me honestly. Would you have given me $85,000 if I'd asked? The question hung between us. Would I have? Probably not such a large sum. But I would have helped him somehow, found a middle ground. I'll never know now, will I? I said softly. Because you chose deception over honesty. Richard's expression darkened. Mom, I need you to understand something. Amanda is pregnant. This revelation should have been joyous news. My first grandchild. Instead, it felt like another manipulation. We're going to have a baby, and we might be homeless if you don't help us. Do you want your grandchild living in a shelter? Because that's where we're headed if you press charges. The threat was thinly veiled. Help us financially or never see your grandchild. I felt physically ill. I think you should leave now, I said, standing on shaky legs. Mom, please.
No, Richard.
What you and Amanda did wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. It was calculated. You betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. I need time to process this. So you're choosing money over family? His voice had an ugly edge I'd never heard before. I'm choosing self-respect, I replied. Please go. After he left, I sat in the growing darkness, too numb to even cry. The phone rang again around 8 p.m. It was Harriet, my closest friend since teaching together decades ago. Margaret? You missed book club. Are you all right? The concern in her voice broke through my shock. I found myself telling her everything, the words pouring out between sobs. Within 30 minutes, she was at my door with a container of homemade soup and a determination to help that reminded me why our friendship had endured for 40 years. You need a lawyer, she said practically after listening to the full story. And not just any lawyer. Someone who specializes in elder financial abuse. Elder abuse? The term seemed extreme. This is my son we're talking about, not some scammer. Harriet took my hand. Margaret, honey, what Richard and Amanda did is textbook financial exploitation. The fact that he's your son makes it worse, not better. She stayed the night on my couch, and her presence kept the crushing loneliness at bay. In the morning, she made me breakfast and helped me make a list of immediate actions. Contact an attorney, change all passwords, check credit reports, inform my sister Dorothy. With Harriet's support, I made the hardest decision of my life. I would pursue legal action against my only child. Not out of vengeance, but because without consequences, I feared Richard would never change course. And if Amanda was truly pregnant, my future grandchild deserved a father with integrity, not one who took the easy way out through deception. Attorney Gerald Wilson's office was located in a converted Victorian house downtown. The waiting room featured comfortable chairs and subdued lighting, clearly designed to put anxious clients at ease. At 71, Mr. Wilson had specialized in elder law for over 30 years. His gentle manner and direct questions helped organize the chaotic emotions swirling inside me. Unfortunately, Mrs. Bradley, what you're describing is increasingly common, he explained, after I'd recounted the bank incident. Even among family members. Sometimes especially among family members. He asked detailed questions about my finances, my relationship with Richard, and the timeline of events. When I mentioned Amanda's pregnancy and Richard's implied threat about access to my grandchild, he made a note but didn't comment directly. The first step is to fully secure your assets, he advised. I'll draft a letter revoking any authority Richard might claim over your accounts. We'll need to conduct a complete audit to determine exactly how much was taken without authorization. The investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. Beyond the $30,000 Richard had admitted to taking, there were numerous smaller withdrawals I hadn't authorized. My mail had been systematically redirected to a P.O. box Richard had opened. He had used my social security number and other personal information to gain online access to my accounts, changing settings so notifications went to an email address I didn't recognize. Mr. Wilson connected me with Detective Patricia Jackson from the Financial Crimes Unit. With salt and pepper hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that missed nothing, Detective Jackson took my statement with compassion, but without sugarcoating the situation. You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Bradley, she assured me. Many victims in your position never report these crimes out of embarrassment or misplaced loyalty. The criminal complaint process was exhausting and humiliating. I had to recount the betrayal repeatedly, sign affidavits, and provide financial records. Each retelling reopened the wound. Meanwhile, Richard and Amanda mounted an aggressive defense. Amanda's parents, the Blackwells, were apparently wealthier than I'd realized. They hired an expensive attorney who claimed I had verbally promised the money to Richard for his business. They painted me as a confused older woman going back on my word out of senility. The irony wasn't lost on me. First, I was supposedly forgetful, enough to need their help managing my money, and now I was allegedly forgetful about promising it to them. The family division was painful. My sister Dorothy drove up from Florida to stay with me, her protective instincts in full force. "I always thought that girl was trouble," she declared, referring to Amanda. "Too polished, too perfect. Never trusted her." Amanda's parents made public statements supporting their daughter and Richard, claiming I was being manipulated by greedy lawyers looking to profit from family discord. Their version of events spread through my small community, creating uncomfortable situations wherever I went. At the grocery store, the pharmacy, even church, I could feel the stares, hear the whispers. The investigation required me to go through all my personal papers, documenting when authentic signatures were made versus suspected forgeries. This led to another shocking discovery in my home office. In a folder I rarely accessed, I found documents with my signature that I had never signed, powers of attorney, account access authorizations, even a draft of a will leaving everything to Richard. The signatures were good imitations, but clearly forgeries when compared to my actual handwriting. The evidence was mounting, but the emotional toll was becoming unbearable. Richard began a campaign of desperate phone calls, alternating between begging me to drop the charges and accusing me of destroying his life. The most devastating call came late one evening. "Mom, please." His voice was ragged. "Amanda had an ultrasound today. We're having a girl. Your granddaughter. Don't you want to be part of her life?" The manipulation was obvious but effective. I'd always wanted a granddaughter. Now this innocent child was being used as leverage before she was even born. "Richard, I will always love you as my son," I said carefully. "And I will love your daughter. But what you and Amanda did was wrong, and there need to be consequences. If you go through with this, you'll never see her," he threatened. "Amanda says she won't let her child be around someone who would send her father to jail." The call ended with me in tears, torn between maternal love and self-protection. Was preserving my financial security worth losing my only grandchild? The question haunted me through sleepless nights. The first court appearance was scheduled 6 weeks after the bank incident. Entering the courthouse, seeing Richard and Amanda sitting with their attorney, was surreal. Amanda's pregnancy was now visible, her hand protectively cradling her small bump. Richard looked haggard, avoiding my eyes when I entered with Mr. Wilson. The charges were formally read: identity theft, forgery, attempted grand theft. The evidence presented included bank records, the forged documents found in my home, and testimony from Mr. Peterson about the confrontation at the bank. Richard and Amanda pleaded not guilty, but their attorney immediately began negotiating with the prosecutor about a potential plea deal. Outside the courthouse, a reporter from the local paper approached. "Mrs. Bradley, how does it feel to press charges against your own son?" The flash of a camera caught my stricken expression before Mr. Wilson intervened, guiding me quickly to his car. The next morning, my name appeared in the paper. Retired teacher pursues criminal charges against son in alleged elder financial abuse case. The article was factual but sensationalized, emphasizing the family drama aspect. Suddenly, my private pain was public knowledge. Phone calls poured in from former colleagues, church members, even parents of students I'd taught years ago. Some offered support, others expressed shock that I would do this to my own child. A few suggested I should drop the charges for the sake of family. No one seemed to consider what Richard and Amanda had done to me. The community gossip intensified. I overheard whispers at the pharmacy. "That's her, the one suing her pregnant daughter-in-law." At my weekly bridge game, longtime friends asked prying questions thinly disguised as concern. I began avoiding public places, having groceries delivered rather than face the stares and whispers. Through it all, the legal process ground forward. Discovery revealed even more troubling information. Amanda had researched signs of dementia online months before the bank incident. They had consulted an attorney about gaining guardianship over me. using fabricated examples of my supposed mental decline. The depth of the conspiracy was breathtaking. Despite the mounting evidence, I remained conflicted. This was my son. The little boy who once made me a world's best mom card with crooked letters and too much glitter. The teenager who helped care for Franklin during his first heart attack. The man who had held me at Franklin's funeral when my legs threatened to give way. How had we arrived at this terrible place? The stress began manifesting physically. I lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. Sleep became elusive, with nightmares waking me when I did manage to drift off. The constant tension caused headaches and stomach problems. I felt decades older than my 68 years. One morning, while making tea, a crushing pain spread across my chest, radiating down my left arm. Convinced I was having a heart attack like Franklin, I managed to call 911 before collapsing in the kitchen. The ambulance arrived quickly, paramedics efficient and kind as they rushed me to Springfield Memorial Hospital. After multiple tests, the diagnosis wasn't a heart attack, but a severe panic attack mimicking cardiac symptoms. The attending physician, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, sat beside my hospital bed with concerned eyes. "Mrs. Bradley, your physical symptoms are being caused by extreme psychological distress," she explained gently. "Your body is telling you something important. This level of stress is dangerous at any age, but particularly for someone in their 60s. She recommended therapy and offered a referral to Elaine Foster, a psychologist specializing in trauma and family conflict. Initially, I resisted. Therapy seemed an admission of weakness, something for people with real problems. Wasn't I just experiencing the natural reaction to betrayal? Dorothy disagreed. "Margaret, you've always been the strong one, the fixer. But you can't fix this alone. Please just try one session." To appease her, I agreed. Dr. Foster's office was a calm space with soft lighting and no clocks visible. Unlike the direct approach of the attorney and detective, she asked open-ended questions, letting me control the narrative. "How are you sleeping?" she asked in our first session. "Barely," I admitted. "When I close my eyes, I see Amanda counting my money, or Richard's face when I caught him. Sometimes I dream that I'm locked out of my house while they're inside, taking everything." Over several sessions, Dr. Foster helped me articulate feelings I'd been suppressing. The shame of being victimized by my own child. The guilt that perhaps my parenting had somehow created a person capable of such deception. The fear of losing my financial security so late in life, when I had no way to replace the stolen funds. "You keep mentioning that you must have failed as a mother," she observed during our fourth session. "Why do you believe Richard's actions reflect on your parenting?" The question stopped me short. Because children learn their values at home. If Richard could do this, I must have failed to teach him honesty and integrity. "Or," she suggested, "perhaps you taught those values clearly, but Richard made his own choices as an adult. Consider that you might be giving yourself too much responsibility for his actions." This perspective was revolutionary. I'd automatically assumed blame, never considering that Richard's choices belonged solely to him. We began exploring patterns in our relationship, particularly after Franklin's death. How I'd stepped in financially whenever Richard struggled. How I'd never required accountability for previous loans. How my overgiving had perhaps enabled his irresponsibility. "You've been a giving tree," Dr. Foster said. "Allowing pieces of yourself to be taken until there's almost nothing left. That's not love, Margaret. That's martyrdom." She recommended a support group for victims of family financial abuse. The first meeting, held in a church basement, terrified me. Walking into a room of strangers to discuss my shame and failure seemed impossible. But the faces that greeted me weren't judgmental. They were people like me, struggling with similar betrayals. Gladys, a 74-year-old widow, had discovered her daughter emptying her accounts to support a gambling addiction. James, barely 60, had signed over his house to his nephew, who then evicted him. Each story contained echoes of my own. The shock, the shame, the self-blame, and the agonizing conflict between self-protection and family loyalty. "The hardest part," Gladys told me over coffee after the meeting, "is fighting the cultural message that mothers should sacrifice everything for their children. That our needs don't matter once we become parents." Her words resonated deeply. Hadn't I always put Richard first? Even now, with concrete evidence of his betrayal, I agonized more over his welfare than my own. Meanwhile, Harriet organized a support system among my friends. Different people checked on me daily, bringing meals or simply sitting with me so I wouldn't be alone with my thoughts. These small kindnesses became lifelines, reminding me that authentic love doesn't take, it gives. The holiday season arrived, traditionally a time when Richard and I maintained our family traditions. This year, there would be no Christmas Eve dinner, no exchange of gifts, no watching It's a Wonderful Life together as we had since his childhood. The emptiness of my house echoed the emptiness in my heart. Dorothy had returned to Florida for a previously planned cruise with her husband, though she offered repeatedly to cancel. I insisted she go, not wanting to disrupt more lives. Harriet invited me to her family gathering, but the thought of forced holiday cheer among people walking on eggshells around me was unbearable. I declined graciously, assuring her I would be fine alone. Christmas Eve found me sitting in Franklin's chair, surrounded by decades of holiday decorations that suddenly seemed meaningless. The carefully preserved ornaments Richard had made in elementary school, the stockings with our names embroidered by my mother, the nativity set Franklin had carved, all painful reminders of a family that no longer existed as I had known it. In that moment of profound loneliness, I reached rock bottom. What was the point of fighting to protect my financial future when my emotional future seemed so bleak? Perhaps I should drop the charges, give Richard and Amanda the money, buy access to my granddaughter with my retirement fund. At least then I wouldn't be alone. Seeking distraction from these dark thoughts, I ventured into the attic to find a particular Christmas album Franklin had loved. Among the dusty boxes, I stumbled upon a container labeled Teaching Awards. Inside were plaques, certificates, and dozens of letters from former students. One by one I read their words. You believed in me when no one else did. Your literature class changed how I see the world. 20 years later, I still hear your voice when I read poetry. These weren't just polite thank you notes. They were testaments to a life of positive impact beyond motherhood. Among the papers was a journal I'd kept during my early teaching years. The idealistic young woman in those pages had dreams beyond raising a family. She wanted to shape minds, inspire critical thinking, leave a mark on the world through education. She had value independent of her role as mother or wife. Sitting cross-legged on the attic floor, surrounded by evidence of my professional accomplishments, something shifted inside me. I had spent decades pouring myself into others, my students, my husband, my son. I had given Richard every advantage, every opportunity, unlimited love. His choices weren't my failure. They were his betrayal of the values I had absolutely taught him. For perhaps the first time since becoming a mother, I allowed myself to prioritize my own well-being. I deserved financial security in my retirement years. I deserved relationships based on mutual respect, not exploitation. I deserved to be valued for who I was, not just what I could provide. This realization didn't erase the pain of Richard's betrayal or the grief of our fractured relationship, but it provided clarity. I would continue with the legal proceedings, not out of vengeance, but as an act of self-respect. I would protect my assets not out of greed, but because I had earned every penny through decades of hard work. And I would establish boundaries with Richard and Amanda, not out of cruelty, but because healthy relationships require consequences for harmful actions. Descending from the attic, I felt lighter than I had in months. The path forward would be difficult, but for the first time I was certain it was the right one. The new year brought renewed determination. With Mr. Wilson's guidance, I developed a comprehensive plan to secure my financial future. We transferred my remaining funds to different financial institutions, creating a more complex system that would require multiple verifications for any significant transactions. I enrolled in professional credit monitoring services and placed a freeze on my credit report to prevent new accounts being opened in my name. Each bank visit, each form, each security question created a shield around what remained of my life savings. The process was tedious but empowering. For each step completed, I felt incrementally safer, more in control of my own destiny. The criminal case against Richard and Amanda progressed toward a resolution. Their attorney, recognizing the strength of the evidence against them, negotiated a plea agreement with the prosecutor. In exchange for reduced charges, they would admit guilt, make full restitution, serve probation rather than jail time, and complete financial counseling and community service. When Mr. Wilson presented this offer, my emotions were mixed. Part of me wanted them to face more severe consequences. The other part was relieved that Richard wouldn't go to prison. Despite everything, the thought of my son behind bars was unbearable. "This is actually a good outcome," Mr. Wilson advised. "You'll recover your money. Richard will have a criminal record, but not a prison term that would make rebuilding his life impossible. And the court will impose strict monitoring of their finances for the probation period." I agreed to the terms, and the case concluded with a subdued court appearance where Richard and Amanda formally accepted the plea deal. Richard read a prepared statement of apology that sounded hollow to my ears, crafted more by his attorney than from genuine remorse. Amanda remained stone-faced, one hand resting on her now prominent baby bump, the other clutching Richard's arm possessively. The financial consequences for them were immediate and severe. Richard's business, already struggling, collapsed completely under the weight of the legal fees and restitution requirements. The expensive house they'd stretched to buy went into foreclosure. Amanda's parents eventually purchased it from the bank to prevent their daughter from becoming homeless. But the humiliation was evident in Richard's defeated posture as he thanked his in-laws for their temporary assistance. 2 weeks after the court date, a thick envelope arrived in my mail. Inside was a handwritten letter from Richard, along with copies of their financial counseling homework and community service verification. The letter read as genuine contrition, acknowledging the pain he'd caused and the trust he'd broken. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote. "But I want you to know that I recognize the terrible mistake I made. The counseling is helping me understand how I rationalized my actions and betrayed everything you taught me about honesty and integrity. I'm trying to become someone you could be proud of again, even if that seems impossible right now." I brought the letter to my next session with Dr. Foster, uncertain how to respond. "What do you feel when you read it?" she asked. "Confusion," I admitted. "It sounds sincere, but after such calculated deception, how can I ever trust his words again?" We spent the session analyzing the letter, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus manipulation. Dr. Foster pointed out both positive indicators, taking full responsibility without blaming Amanda or circumstances, and concerning elements, subtle pressure to reestablish contact. "Trust isn't rebuilt through words," she advised. "It's rebuilt through consistent actions over time. You're not required to make any decisions about your relationship with Richard right now. You can acknowledge his letter without committing to forgiveness or reconciliation." I sent a brief, neutral response, acknowledging his apology without making promises. Setting this boundary felt strange but necessary. Another step in reclaiming my autonomy. Meanwhile, I continued rebuilding my life in practical ways. Mr. Wilson helped me update my will and establish a revocable trust with an independent trustee, removing any possibility that Richard could access my assets after my death without proper oversight. This step felt harsh but necessary given recent events. With Dorothy's encouragement, I began volunteering at the public library 3 afternoons a week, helping with their adult literacy program. The work reconnected me to my teaching roots while introducing me to new people who knew nothing about my family drama. In their eyes, I was simply Margaret, the patient retired teacher who explained comma rules and helped practice pronunciation. To better understand the financial system that had failed to protect me, I enrolled in a personal finance course at the community college. Being the oldest student in the class was initially uncomfortable, but my experiences brought valuable perspective to discussions about financial vulnerability and exploitation. The instructor, Professor Jenkins, eventually asked me to speak to the class about warning signs of financial abuse, turning my painful experience into an educational opportunity for others. As spring arrived, so did communications about Richard and Amanda's baby. Through Dorothy, who maintained minimal contact with Richard, I learned they were expecting a girl in May, to be named Lily. The news brought complicated emotions: joy at the thought of a granddaughter, pain at the likelihood I might never know her. Richard sent formal notification of Lily's birth via certified mail. A hospital photo of a tiny, perfect face wrapped in a pink blanket. The accompanying note was brief: Thought you might want to know your granddaughter arrived safely. She's healthy, 7 pounds 3 ounces, 20 inches long. No invitation to visit. No suggestion of reconciliation. Just clinical information, leaving the next move entirely to me. After consulting with Dr. Foster, I sent a small gift. A silver rattle and a children's book I had read to Richard countless times, with a simple card congratulating them on Lily's birth. My gesture was acknowledged with a formal thank you note in Amanda's handwriting. This stilted exchange established the pattern for the next several months. Occasional photos of Lily arrived by mail. I responded with appropriate seasonal gifts. The ache of this distant, formal relationship with my only grandchild was profound, but I recognized that rebuilding trust would require patience and time. 6 months after the court case concluded, I received an unexpected phone call from Richard. His voice sounded different, humbler, less entitled. "Mom, I've been in individual therapy," he said after awkward preliminary small talk. "My counselor thinks family therapy might be beneficial, if you're willing. No pressure, just something to consider." I promised to think about it, non-committal but not immediately refusing. This represented progress, even if reconciliation remained a distant possibility. Around this same time, the director of the Springfield Senior Center asked if I would consider speaking at their monthly financial literacy workshop. Apparently, Professor Jenkins had mentioned my willingness to share my experience. The thought of publicly discussing my family's betrayal was daunting, but the opportunity to help others avoid similar situations appealed to my teacher's heart. My presentation, titled "Protecting Your Financial Future, When Trust Isn't Enough," drew an unexpectedly large audience. Speaking candidly about Richard and Amanda's actions was difficult, but the response was overwhelmingly supportive. Many attendees shared similar experiences or concerns about vulnerable family members. A local television reporter covering the event for the evening news requested an interview. 18 months earlier, I would have declined, too ashamed to broadcast my family troubles. Now I agreed without hesitation. If my story could prevent one elderly person from being exploited by family members, the personal discomfort would be worthwhile. The 3-minute segment aired on the evening news, presenting me not as a victim, but as an advocate for financial literacy and elder protection. The station received so many requests for more information that they invited me back for an extended interview on their weekend community program. Richard saw the broadcast. "You were impressive," he texted afterward. "Dad would have been proud of your courage." It was the first message from him that didn't carry an undercurrent of manipulation or self-pity. Perhaps he truly was changing. Perhaps in time we might find a new way to be family, not based on blind trust or financial dependence, but on mutual respect and healthy boundaries. As the 1-year anniversary of the bank incident approached, I realized how dramatically my life had transformed. The painful catalyst had forced growth I might otherwise have avoided. I had reclaimed my identity beyond motherhood, established financial independence, developed new skills, and discovered a voice I didn't know I possessed. The betrayal remained the most painful experience of my life, but its aftermath had revealed strengths I never knew I had. 1 year after that devastating Tuesday at Springfield Trust Bank, my life bears little resemblance to what came before. The comfortable routine I had established after retirement has been replaced by something more vibrant, more intentional, and ultimately more fulfilling. 6 months ago, I sold my house on Maple Street. Though filled with memories, both beautiful and painful, the 3-bedroom ranch had become too much to maintain alone. More importantly, it represented a past I needed to move beyond. The equity, combined with my recovered savings, allowed me to purchase a lovely 2-bedroom condominium in Ridgewood Gardens, a secure community designed for active seniors. My new home features wide doorways, accessible bathroom fixtures, and a first-floor location. Practical considerations for aging that I had previously ignored. The community provides security, maintenance services, and organized social activities that have introduced me to dozens of interesting neighbors with their own life stories. At 69, I'm one of the younger residents, a fact that amuses me daily. The most unexpected joy has been rediscovering my passion for teaching. What began as volunteer work at the library expanded into a part-time position coordinating their adult literacy program. Twice weekly, I also tutor underprivileged children at the community center, helping them develop the reading skills that will open doors throughout their lives. The children's unguarded affection and genuine excitement when mastering new concepts reminds me why I chose education as my life's work. My social circle has expanded beyond my longtime friends to include a travel group for seniors. Last month, we took a weekend trip to the mountains, my first vacation in nearly a decade. Next spring, we're planning a 2-week tour of national parks. At dinner one evening, I realized I had laughed more in those 3 days than in the previous 3 years. Happiness is possible again, even after betrayal. Richard and I have established a fragile, carefully negotiated relationship. After 6 months of family therapy with Dr. Kaufman, a specialist in family estrangement, we have progressed to monthly lunch meetings at a neutral restaurant. Our conversations remain somewhat superficial, focused primarily on safe topics like my volunteer work or his new job in retail management. The deeper wounds are addressed only in the therapist's office, where a trained professional can guide the difficult conversations. Amanda's relationship with Richard dissolved 3 months after Lily's birth. The financial pressures, public humiliation, and criminal records proved too much for their already strained marriage. Amanda moved back with her parents, taking Lily with her. The divorce proceedings were contentious, with custody arrangements complicated by their criminal histories. Through court-mandated arrangements, I now have supervised visitation with Lily twice monthly. These precious hours are carefully structured, taking place at a family visitation center with a social worker present. At 15 months old, Lily is a bright, curious child with Richard's inquisitive eyes and Amanda's determined chin. She doesn't know me as grandmother yet. To her, I'm simply Ms. Margaret who reads stories and builds block towers. But it's a beginning, a tentative bridge to a future relationship. Richard has begun addressing the underlying issues that contributed to his poor decisions. Through therapy, he identified an undiagnosed gambling addiction that had accelerated his financial desperation. He attends weekly support group meetings and maintains strict financial monitoring as part of his probation requirements. His current living situation, a modest apartment, budget-conscious lifestyle, and entry-level job, represents a humbling reset from his previous ambitions. I've had to navigate complex emotions about forgiveness. Dr. Foster has helped me understand that forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about releasing the consuming anger, so it doesn't define my remaining years. Some days I achieve this peace. Other days the betrayal still feels raw. Both responses are valid parts of the healing process. The financial lessons have been equally important. I've become an unexpected advocate for elder financial security, speaking regularly at community centers, retirement homes, and church groups. My presentations emphasize practical protection strategies. Securing important documents, establishing monitoring systems, recognizing manipulation tactics, and maintaining financial independence even within close family relationships. My relationship with money itself has transformed. Previously, I viewed my savings primarily as potential assistance for Richard or future inheritance. Now I recognize that financial security is a form of self-respect, not selfishness. I've learned to balance generosity with appropriate boundaries, helping others without compromising my own stability. Through my advocacy work, I've met dozens of elderly individuals who experienced similar betrayals but suffered in ashamed silence. Their gratitude for my public speaking is humbling. One 80-year-old man approached me after a presentation, tears in his eyes, and thanked me for giving him permission to finally talk about his daughter's financial exploitation. "I thought I was the only one," he said. "I thought it was my fault." These connections have created purpose from pain. When the local newspaper that once sensationalized my family drama published a feature article about my advocacy work, the narrative had completely shifted. No longer a victim, I was portrayed as a resilient elder rights champion who transformed personal tragedy into community service. The most profound lesson has been discovering my worth beyond family roles. For decades, my identity was primarily mother, wife, teacher, always in relation to others. The betrayal forced me to recognize my intrinsic value as Margaret, independent of what I give or do for others. This self-recognition would have eventually been necessary as I age, but the crisis accelerated the process. Would I choose this path of pain and growth? Of course not. The price was too high, the hurt too deep. But having been forced down this road, I've discovered strength I never knew I possessed. At nearly 70, I've begun a new chapter with greater wisdom, clearer boundaries, and a more authentic understanding of both family obligation and self-respect. Richard and Amanda tried to take my financial security, but in defending myself, I gained something far more valuable. The knowledge that I can survive profound betrayal and rebuild a meaningful life. The money they attempted to steal was substantial, but the self-respect I gained by standing up for myself? That's truly priceless. If my story resonates with your own experience of family betrayal or financial exploitation, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? What helped you heal from betrayal? Remember to subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation, and like this video if it provided insight or comfort. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that it's never too late to create a new beginning, even after the most painful endings.